Hey there everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's video, we have a story about a potential player for a Dungeons & Dragons campaign going a little too horny with their character's backstory. A story about a, quote, nice guy that gets booted from a D&D game for being a creep that then proceeds to threaten the Dungeon Master. But before we get into those, for those who didn't see it on Tuesday evening, I found an injured kitty and took her to an emergency 24-hour vet clinic. The vet bill is a bit costly, and I'm not in the best financial situation, so I decided to try a GoFundMe to help alleviate some of the costs. And I just have to say that I am overwhelmed by the generosity of everyone, as the fundraiser grew faster than I could ever imagine. Seriously, I can honestly say that I have some of the most warm-hearted and generous viewers that any YouTuber could ask for. And I just have to say from my heart, thanks to all of you who donated and or shared the GoFundMe link. Speaking of which, we have a special guest. She's not totally out of the woods yet, but she is doing much better. So again, a big thank you. But with that said, let's get into some DnD horror stories. I can assure you, dear DM, that sex scene was absolutely critical for my character's backstory. By Reddit user, Tan Kuman. Back when I was dungeon mastering a lot, I used to post ads for my games with application questionnaires, so that I could filter out players I thought I wouldn't really vibe with, and create groups I thought would gel well. This failed spectacularly, but that's a story for another post. This one is about Bob. Bob really bamboozled me by submitting an application I thought was really good. He had a solid character idea, and clearly put thought into how he would implement him into my world. And by and large, I was sold. I had a quick chat with him just to tell him how I would run games, when the session 0 was, and what I expected from his backstory, as I did with all players. I had quite a bit of lore for the world, but mostly tried to give the players enough to work with, without lore dumping, unless specifically asked. He was aiming to play a warlock, so we talked about patrons, and I sent over the basic lore details of a few, so that he could draw from it for his backstory. This included a celestial who grew too prideful and was cast into the hells, and through unimportant lore, escaped and became a goddess of redemption. A minor deity who could be the matron of clerics, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks. I sent him her character art, but this turns out to be a mistake. Bob was into it. In fact, Bob was a bit too into it. Session 0 goes by without too much issue, and Session 1 is 2 weeks later, giving players time to lock classes in and send backstories. Well, Bob is now basically pestering me for details on his patron's backstory for almost a week, and while I dig the enthusiasm, this seems a bit much. Then, his backstory lands into my inbox. It is something. His warlock is clearly some sort of main character. He took the idea he came to me with and mashed it with every single thing he found cool in the lore. He was now a pirate and a mercenary, but is secretly the prince of a country, and also secretly an Asimar, because while his mother is the queen, his father is this world's version of Asmodeus, in this setting a god of retribution and self-sacrifice. He kills so many people and is so tough and scary, yada yada. All this at level 1, mind you. When he is left with nothing on account of a betrayal by his first mate, as inevitable as it is stupid. The first mate made a deal with Asmodeus' second-in-command to overthrow Asmodeus, and this is somehow orchestrated by trying to kill Bob's character. He is saved by the goddess of redemption, who apparently had her eye on him for a while. This would be fine-ish, except it turns into the story of how they fall in love. Then a sex scene, which he writes in full, taking up like 30% of his entire backstory. making me deeply uncomfortable. To put a cherry on top of this sundae, the pact is formed because he is so good at the sex, so the goddess gives him his warlock powers and is now his girlfriend. I inform him that I want no part of this BS, but he then says that he thought this game was for adults. After all, I tagged that I was looking for players who were 18 plus. I explained that this is because there's violence and swearing, and sex happens in the world, but I just have no desire to engage in role-playing it or reading explicit writings about it. He then goes, "Aha," and calls me a hypocrite, so I just block him. The end. It sounds to me like Bob was a player that wanted to use D&D as a way to just roleplay sex all the time, if 30% of his backstory being a detailed sex scene is any indication. That, and he wanted to be super powerful, all before even starting the game. When OP brought up that they were uncomfortable with all that, and that player called OP a hypocrite, I think OP did the right thing by just saying nope and booting him, as that player was showing signs of a horny standoffish that guy with main character syndrome. Though, what are your thoughts on this one? Let's move on. Player goes rules lawyer and I snapped. Am I the a-hole? By Reddit user PresentProfit2340. So this happened somewhat recently as of typing this post. I am a new dungeon master, running my first campaign. The player we will call Rules Lawyer for this story is an experienced dungeon master, and has claimed to have ran many games for many years. There are 2 other players, but Bard is the only relevant one for this story. Might have a lot of mechanics mentioned, as this is a Rules Lawyer problem, or maybe I am the problem. The main antagonist of my campaign are 7 demon lords based around the 7 deadly sins, reflected by their personalities and monster sheets. They had fought them multiple times and are very aware of what they can do. There are certain conditions that must be met for the demon lords to be killed permanently. They have permakilled 2 so far, with Rules Lawyer being the one to figure out how to meet these conditions. Oftentimes, doing it in a way I did not intend it should be, but he saw mechanical flaws in my wording and used it against me, but I let it be. One day, they were focusing on the Demon Lord of Lust. We will just call her the BBEG for this story. They find out that the BBEG is a succubus. What a surprise. They find out that BBEG can only be killed if there's no one charmed by her. If a single source of damage drops her to 0 HP, a creature she has charmed takes the damage instead. Her charm lasts indefinitely and can charm up to 5 people, her charisma mod. BBEG reveals to the party that she has charmed 5 NPCs that they know and care about, making this confrontation very tricky. She also revealed to them that she has sent 4 of the 5 of them to 5 different regions, making it near impossible to find them and uncharm them with greater restoration or dispel evil all at once, without letting BBEG simply charm other people as soon as someone gets uncharmed. Bard jokingly attempts to charm BBEG, saying that she will outlust lust, to which I revealed that the embodiment of lust is immune to charm, to which Bard responds, "Well, that's expected." This will be important. I end the session on a cliffhanger, though Rules Lawyer claims that he figured it out, and that we will all be blown away by his plan on how Lust will be killed without harming the people she has charmed. All week, he keeps hyping up his master plan, claiming that the DM did not think this through. Finally, we come to the next session, with Rules Lawyer being super hyped and all, saying that he is always the one to figure it out. His plan? Dominate person. His whole argument is that he can command the BBEG to drown herself. I'm like, what? And he says that the BBEG's ability only concerns HP and damage. Suffocation, however, is a timer thing that has something to do with the con score. Honestly, I don't really get it, but this is his argument. He says he cast it. In my mind, I'm like, aw crap, here we go again. I remind him that she's immune to charm, as seen with the bard's attempt to charm her last time. If he'd like, he can take it back and not cast it. Charm immunity means no dominate person, though he's not having it. From the top of my head, this is how the conversation went. Rules lawyer. Succubuses are not immune to charm. Me. I homebrewed her stats. Rules lawyer. New dungeon masters shouldn't be homebrewing stuff, especially for high-level games. It's about rewarding your players. It's not all about what the rules say. Me. Fine, you cast it. I roll in front of everyone. Bam, she saves anyway. Bard. Silvery barbs. Me, rolling in front of everyone again, and it still saves. Saved twice. Now, let's move on. Now, Rules Lawyer has tried and succeeded pulling off shenanigans like this before. I, being a new dungeon master, just assumed that he knew better and went along with his arguments on how things should work. As the campaign goes on, I slowly realize that Rules Lawyer is misinterpreting many things, or is just straight up wrong about it, so I can't just let it be this time. Plus, another player, Bard, did not get past BBEG's charm immunity, so it'd be unfair to let it work for Rules Lawyer. Rules Lawyer decides to keep attacking BBEG, prompting her ability to make her charmed targets to take the damage instead, putting NPCs that they like at risk. Bard is like, WTF, but Rules Lawyer just keeps saying things like, "We're being railroaded. This is what a railroad looks like," and "It's what the Dungeon Master wants us to do. No other solution." He also says stuff under his breath the whole time, like, "New DMs plus homebrew equals mess." I tried to ignore it, but everyone has their limits. I ask him, "Is there an effing problem?" He then erupts in reply, and I am paraphrasing because I don't remember every word he said in this long rant. Quote, "Succubus aren't even supposed to be immune to charm. I'm being punished for thinking outside the box. I figured out how to solve your stupid boss fight in a different way than you planned. But of course, being inexperienced, you chose your plans over agency." Now, my response probably wasn't the best, but I was pissed and said, "I'm the effing DM. What I say goes. And I say session ends and you're booted." He then stormed out after he throws a bunch of insults at me and my game, and it hurt, honestly. The following few days, he tried to start his own campaign and recruit my remaining 2 players. None of them joined, and the fact that none of them joined and continue to play in mine puts a smile to my face. So, am I the a-hole? Are we both a-holes? Because I know for sure that I did not handle the situation very well. Now, while I agree that OP could have handled that situation a bit better, I wouldn't necessarily call them the a-hole here. Rules Lawyer was the one to start to insult OP and his game, and then throw a hissy fit about his plan not working the way he thought. And in fairness to OP, Dominate Person does use the wording that those affected by it are charmed, so OP was right to not have it work, since it didn't work when Bard tried to charm the BBEG. Sometimes in D&D, there are no easy ways to get around some predicaments that the party is facing, and that can sometimes be frustrating. But Rules Lawyer took things too far when he started putting down OP for being a new DM, when he didn't get his way. Though I will say that is quite the position that the party was in, and off the top of my head, I can't really think of any way they could get around hurting the people that the Succubus had charmed. What do you all think on this one? Both on OP's reaction to Rules Lawyer, and how the party could have possibly gotten around that situation. I'm legit curious. But with that said, let's move on. DnD player threatens to shoot the DM. By Reddit user GuyetWalrus7954. Oh boy, this situation is insane. It just happened last week, but this campaign has been going on for a couple of months now. I am going to, more or less, use people's character class to identify them in and out of game for the purposes of this post. The a-hole here was an acquaintance of our friend that was playing a bard. She invited him after meeting him on another server. He rolled up a paladin, and I was playing a druid. The other players are relatively irrelevant to the story. So we are playing a campaign set in Waterdeep, but crawling with zombies. It's kind of an urban mystery / eldritch horror type campaign. It's very fun. That guy obviously had a crush on the friend that invited him, and would clumsily flirt with her character, but to no avail. In fact, she ended up dating the Dungeon Master in real life. They didn't have any romantic or sexy scenes in game though, since her bard's backstory would not allow that, as Bard's character was married. This did not make that guy / paladin feel any better. Once he found out that they were dating, he not only threw a fit and said that she was, quote, leading him on like every other female does to good men. Uh-oh, looks like we got a player with nice guy syndrome. But he started actively sabotaging the campaign by killing important plot-relevant characters, essaying NPCs, destroying critical magic items, PvP for no reason, and doing stupid crap to intentionally get the party killed. Luckily, he failed. It got so bad that we had to temporarily ban him twice. A temporary ban? Twice? I'd say that behavior would warrant a permaban right away. After he came back from his second ban, he was warned that if he crosses the line again, he was going to be permabanned from the server. He accepted these terms, though with contempt in his voice. I honestly could tell that this was going to blow up. I even told Dungeon Master this, but he had a strict 3 strikes policy in each of his campaigns, which, to be fair, he swore by this policy for as long as we'd been playing with him. But of course, that guy didn't waste any time after rolling up his, quote, Chad Bugbear Barbarian to establish himself as another murder hobo, and claimed the typical, "It's what my character would do." He did attempt, once again, to seduce Bard, claiming that he was no longer a beta, and she could not resist. Well, after telling her that she, quote, needs a real man inside of her. Dude, ew. Bard once again rejected him, to which he then demanded to roll seduction, and Dungeon Master told him that player characters don't have to abide by a seduction roll, even if it's a natural 20. That guy then blew up and said, "Of course you would say that. You're effing her." DM then said, "I said no because players get to decide what they do with their characters, especially in regards to sex. Now cool it before I permaban you." He then backed off until night came, and the barbarian said, "I sneak into Bart's tent and flip her face up as I whip it out and he gets banned. Yeah, you would think. It shouldn't have been able to have gone that far to begin with. After a few minutes of us being like, what the F was that guy's problem? And Dungeon Master apologizing to Bard for not banning him sooner, and Bard telling Dungeon Master it's okay, we see a random Discord account that was obviously just created, and we immediately recognize the voice of that guy. He starts trying to deny what he was planning to do in the game, but Dungeon Master and Bard's player call BS, so he goes into a rage and calls her a whore, and calls the Dungeon Master a manipulative scumbag who is twisting her mind and a bunch of other weird crap, until the Dungeon Master yells, "Enough! Let me make this very clear to you. You are banned, period. Come back again, and I will report you to the Discord admins. Are we clear?" And then he banned him again. And this is where things get worse. We were all still kinda shocked and talking about what just happened. We then start to calm down and talk about other things to kind of try to end this session on a lighter note. But of course, this a-hole comes back, and without saying a word, post an AI-generated picture of him shooting the Dungeon Master in the head. Bard's player said, "What the F?" as that guy just hopped back into voice chat and said, "F around and find out," before the Dungeon Master banned him again, and then told us that he was gonna report him to the Discord admins. We all then just decided to hop off Discord. There was no salvaging this. We were disturbed, and rightfully so. We all block him on literally every social media platform, and now we are kind of taking a break from D&D. It's just no fun realizing that there's a good chance that when we play, this a-hole could just create another burner account to harass and or threaten us. TLDR. That guy goes full stalker creep and curses out the girl he was into and threatens her boyfriend with gun violence as he deludes himself into thinking that he's a, quote, nice guy. Jeez, talk about an unstable individual. I would keep a record of all of that, including the picture he sent after being banned. In my honest opinion, there shouldn't have been any type of 3-strike rule for this player. Now, I can understand giving people second chances, but the way this creep acted before his first strike should have warranted a permaban right off the bat. Though, I don't understand why this dude would prevent OP and the rest of the players from playing for fear that this dude would make another burner account. Why not just make a private server that is invite only for OP and the rest of the players? I mean, that way, you can play without risking that. Either way, it is good that OP's DM did eventually kick this dude from the game, and hopefully, they can continue on and continue having fun playing D&D with each other. Let's move on. Dungeon Master straight up said, if I did enough damage, he would negate it, and the boss would walk away with 1 hit point because she's, quote, not supposed to die. Hashtag Choo Choo. By Reddit user, Brash Bandicoot. I finally achieved the dream of many forever Dungeon Masters, and found myself as a player in a new campaign. While I went into this with an open mind, and am mostly happy to finally be able to play, our Dungeon Master is not good. Now, to their credit, they are new to 5th edition, though they apparently know Pathfinder really well. Unfortunately, they seem to have fallen into the trap of, quote, novel writing, i.e., they have a whole plot in mind of what will happen, and we're just following along. The first session was a little heavy-handed, but that's okay. Sometimes you need to set the stage for what's going on. The group is passing through gang territory, and my eloquence bard rolls a 25 persuasion, accompanied by a bribe, that the Dungeon Master suggested I do, in order to be left alone. The Dungeon Master responds with, okay, they attack you anyway, because I can't have you avoid all of my encounters. This is literally the first one we've ever had. Session 2, we find a strange device surrounded by a magical field. Any attempts to touch it are met with, "Are you sure?" by the Dungeon Master. So, scratch that, I guess. There seems to be nothing we can do. The device is extremely heavy, surrounded by magic, and is implied to be some sort of huge bomb. So we elect to leave the area and inform our higher-ups, as we're guards, about what we found. Dungeon Master: oh, really? None of you are going to cast a spell magic on it? I'm really surprised none of you thought to take that spell. Me: dude, we can't take it yet. We're level 3. DM: oh, well, suddenly an alarm goes off. The mysterious woman you saw earlier returns with 4 henchmen. Roll initiative. This was basically how it went. We'd seen the woman earlier when we were sneaking in, and she was presented as some sort of powerful suspect behind this plot to blow up the city. Now, we'd already had combat the previous session, and hadn't rested, so I was down in spell slots and bardic inspirations. On our turns, the barbarian and I both focused our attention on the boss lady, and used our best moves, culminating with me burning my only remaining bardic inspiration and 2nd level spell slot on her. We both did pretty decent damage. Remember, we're only level 3. And then it was the lady's turn, and she teleported away. This would be okay. Classic cheeky DM. If he didn't immediately say, "You're not supposed to kill her. She's not in the fight. If you would have taken her down, I would have given her 1 HP left and had her leave anyway." Like, dude, I get that you're new, but don't tell us that. Anyway, we survived the fight and elect to return to our base and inform our higher-ups about what we found. Then, after the session, the Dungeon Master messages the group saying, "Good job. FYI, you guys are going to be arrested and put on trial next session. Make sure to prepare yourselves." For what? What's the charge? Not defusing the thing? Not being able to learn Dispel Magic at level 3? Investigating a crime scene as a party of guards? Anyway, it's only been 2 sessions, so hopefully the Dungeon Master learns to loosen up and stop the train. Though at least I get to play. Edit. Since people keep asking if I've spoken to him, yes, I've spoken to the DM many times during the 2 whole sessions that we've had. I taught him how to make player characters roll for insight and investigation, tried to help him figure out what the 5e equivalent of a quote city knowledge check is, told him what bardic inspiration is and how it works, and that it's not OP, it's a literal class feature. Strongly implied that only letting someone make a check if they have proficiency in the skill isn't the best idea, and gave him feedback at the end of the first session on how he was a bit stiff at first, but got better midway through when he relaxed the story and just let us roleplay and bond as a group. I've given him a lot of feedback and tips, but I'm still allowed to express frustration in a Reddit post, considering I signed up to be a player, not a backseat dungeon master. That certainly does sound like quite the first 2 sessions, and the whole getting arrested for not being able to do anything with the magical device really doesn't make sense. I think this all boils down to this being the first time the Dungeon Master has ever DM'd, and by the sounds of it, took the suggestions and criticisms in stride that OP had given. I can understand OP's frustrations though, as they just want to be a player and not have to constantly backseat DM. But I would say that if they really do want to be a player, maybe just stick it out and see how things go for a few more sessions. After all, the Dungeon Master is still learning. Then, if things don't start to get better, and OP starts not having fun with the game, then I'd say consider finding another group with a Dungeon Master that isn't so green. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I really do appreciate all of you. Seriously, I am still overwhelmed. And may your games remain horror story free. Until next time.